Ladies and gentlemen, I think you already noticed that I speak with an accent. So please bear with me. A few years ago, I was interviewing Senator Sam Nunn from Georgia. And in the middle of the interview, he turned to me and he said, "You know, you speak with an Eastern European accent, and I think it is a mixture of Hungarian and Czech. Am I right?" And I said, "Yes, you are right, Senator, but you know that you speak with a deep Southern accent too?" So since then, whenever I met him, he always recognizes me. So accent is good for something. I also want to bring it to your attention that President Reagan, before he had his first meeting with the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, one of his aides told him, "Mr. President, don't pay much attention to Mr. Gorbachev's big birthmark on his forehead, because it will distract you from the negotiation. And I have black eyes, maybe you have noticed it, so please don't pay attention to it." The only thing that I tell people how I got it is that don't get into a fight with a strong woman. Actually, I got my black eye. I hit my forehead on the railing, but not a big deal. So please pay attention to my talk and not the black eye. Where should I say? Why I am here? For more than 40 years, I never talked about, after the end of the Second World War, I refused to talk about the Holocaust. For me, the past was the past, and I was concentrating and focusing on the present and the future. Then the Holocaust deniers came out of the woodwork, and they wanted to write history. I was still alive, and I could say I was there, I witnessed it, and because once my generation is gone, there will be museums, movies, books about the Holocaust, but no one who can say, "I was there, I witnessed it, I went through it." So I felt that it is my duty to speak up and my obligation to bear witness. I started to write about my experiences and also to tell people who are willing to listen. So it is why I am here. Now, let me tell you my story. I was born in Czechoslovakia, in a small town on the Danube River between democratic Czechoslovakia and Hungary. Life for my family there was secure and very prosperous. My ancestors lived in the same town for over 300 years. They were grain merchants and manufactured brandy, not the French brandy, the Hungarian brandy. And then the Munich Agreement signed by Hitler and Neville Chamberlain shattered our lives. Democratic Czechoslovakia was dismembered, and the southern part of the country where we lived was incorporated into Hungary. At that time, Hungary was already a close ally of Hitler's Germany. From then on, my family's life and for all the Jews in Hungary started to deteriorate. Finally, in March 1944, the real hell descended on us. Hitler troops occupied Hungary, and the transportation of the Jews to the extermination camp began. It was from Hungary. And in other parts of Europe where the Germans were already settled in, the transportation began much earlier. I was seized by the Nazis and transported in a cattle car to Transylvania. It is now part of Romania, part where Prince Dracula had his castle. So it is where I was transported, and our task was to build a railroad line through the rugged Carpathian mountains, beautiful scenery, but terrible lives there, and started to build this railroad line for the German army. I was barely 18 years old at that time, and not being robustly built, the backbreaking work on starvation diet would have killed me in a short order. Those who couldn't fulfill the daily required daily work quota were often beaten to death or killed any other way. What saved me was my knowledge of handling horses. As a kid, I had my own pony. I learned how to take care of him, and as it happened, the camp commandant needed a groom for his horses. No one else among the group of Jewish slave laborers, and most of them were former doctors, lawyers, professors, and business people, they knew nothing about how to handle horses. So it is how I got the job. Among my duties was to drive the camp commandant in his carriage almost daily to the neighboring villages. Romanian peasants lived there. I befriended some of them, and they gave me occasionally some extra food and some old clothing. Those were desperate times, and surviving under those conditions was very difficult. People were suffering, and many of them dying all around me. We lived under those terrible conditions for some 6 months. Then the threat of being overrun by the advancing Red Army forced the Nazis to evacuate us, and we were forced to march day and night toward Budapest, the capital city of Hungary. It was in the fall of 1944. When we reached Budapest there, my group of slave laborers were put to work to repair railroad lines that were damaged by Allied bombardment. Every day, British and American B-52s appeared in the sky, and they were trying to bomb a railroad bridge spanning the Danube River from Budapest going toward Vienna. But they never hit it. The bomb fell everywhere but on the bridge. For me, but suddenly we heard on the grapevine that we will be transported somewhere out and not to a good place. So we were almost sure that it will be one of the extermination camps. So my choice was to stay and take the chances or escape. So I made an attempt to escape from the slave labor camp. I was fully aware of the risk. I knew that if apprehended, I will be executed on the spot. But the alternative wasn't good either. I managed to escape during an aerial bombardment and set out to reach the inner city of Budapest. I had no money or ID papers, but I was dressed in the civilian clothing what the Romanian peasant gave me. I managed to slip into the inner city, avoiding carefully the numerous checkpoints set up by the police and the fascist militia. I was wandering the streets of Budapest like a hunted animal, searching for shelter, and suddenly an incredible coincidence altered my chances for survival. I ran literally into the arms of my brother-in-law, who was also in a slave labor camp, but in Serbia, in mines he was working, and came to Budapest, managed to get to Budapest, joined the anti-Nazi Zionist-led underground movement. It became his task to help other Jews to escape and gave them false IDs and place where to live. And he took me to the safe house set up by Raoul Wallenberg, the heroic Swedish diplomat, and I stayed there for a few days. But afterwards, I joined also the underground. I was furnished with fake ID paper, money, and my responsibility became to help other Jews to survive. Thinking back of those days, two episodes stand out of my memory. One concerns a young woman by the name of Vera. She was also a member of our underground organization. One day she was caught up in a fascist militia dragnet. Her fake ID papers didn't stand up to scrutiny. She was identified as a Jewish girl, and as was the routine in those days, she was taken to the headquarters of the pro-Nazi Hungarian Arrow Party. In Hungarian they called him Nyilas. A huge building whose basement was used as a torture chamber and holding pen. The detainees were kept there during the day, and at nightfall then marched to the Danube River, and they were forced to strip to their underwear, lined up on the embankment, and shot dead, and the strong current of the river took care of the rest. On this particular night, Vera, together with some 20 other Jewish women, was lined up on the embankment, but she didn't wait until the shots ran out. She jumped into the river and submerged herself and started to swim under the surface. She was a champion swimmer in high school, and so the strong currents swept her away. But it was she was unable anymore to withstand the cold water. It was late in the fall, and the Danube River was almost frozen. So she swam ashore, and there were a row of elegant apartment houses flanking the Danube River. Vera had no choice. She had to have help, so she rang the bell at one of the apartment houses. The custodian opened the door, and she was in her underwear. She blared out her story, what happened to her, and she begged for help and promised a rich reward. After some hesitation, the custodian let her in and took mercy on her. The next day, the custodian brought a note to me from Vera saying what happened to her and that she needs help, new clothing, new ID, and a reward for her rescuer. She was, in the afternoon, she already rejoined our underground group. Many years later, during a visit to Israel, my wife and I had a visit with her. She was married and had a very handsome young son. So it is one of those stories. Another episode that may illustrate the tenure of the times and had to do with the concept of miracle. During the last phase of the war in Budapest, when hunting down Jews became a great pastime of the fascist militia, to avoid bringing attention to myself, I rented not a room, but a bed in the apartment of a Hungarian woman whose son was the commander of one of those fascist militias. So I reasoned that nobody in his right mind would suspect that a Jew would dare to seek shelter in the home of his potential killer. But it worked. In the daylight hours, when the bombardment of the city was too intense, I spent in the basement shelter of another apartment building with a friend. But I made sure that each afternoon by 5 o'clock I was back at the place of my rented bed. Because at 6 o'clock the curfew went into effect and I didn't want my papers to be examined. One particular day, however, no special reason, I lingered on and returned to my quarters just before the curfew. The scene I found after entering the courtyard was sheer bedlam. 20 minutes earlier, a Russian aerial bomb hit the apartment, and my rented bed was there. The 4 other working men who also lived in the same room with me were all dead. Everything was in shambles, everything broken. The only thing in the room that remained intact was my suitcase made from cardboard, kept under my bed. I pulled it out from the rubble and left to find another bed to rent. When southern Czechoslovakia was liberated from the Nazis, I returned to my hometown. Among the members of my family, only my father and my brother survived. My mother, sister, her 3-month-old baby, aunts, uncles, cousins, more than 2,000 of them, all perished in the Holocaust. Now, here are almost everybody whom you see here, except me, the first one. It was my photograph on my false ID paper during the war. The next one is when I was a privileged little boy dressed up in Navy uniform. My mother, who died in the concentration camp, starved to death. My father survived that after the war. He died also. My brother also died. My sister, who died with her 3-month-old baby. It is my hometown. It is my wife when she was a young girl in a Czech national costume. Now, I was a slave laborer, but when I came to America, I became the daughters of the American Revolution gave me a title of being a honorary. It's a big like the Jews coward, if you heard the name. It is something that somebody gives you a big honor. And in the end, Margaret Thatcher, who was the rector of Willamette, became very friendly with us, and she gave us this photograph. So it is what can happen in life. So I am open now to questions. And please don't. Could you understand me? Was it clear?
What did you say?
So what is the first question?
Is Tristan here? Oh, I am. Okay, Tristan's going to help me with the question.
But with the mic, because my hearing isn't so good.
Yeah, I'll say that to you. Okay. We probably won't be able to answer everybody's questions, but we'll try to do our best. So, who has questions? Anybody?
I just saw a testimonial of a surviving twin who was also in Transylvania, maybe at the same time you were. Dr. Mengele was there, and another doctor. And the article that I saw was about how she set herself free as an older person. She survived. Her family did not. They were taken from her immediately off the train, and they were mesmerized that she was a twin. And the twins disappeared into a medical facility, and her parents and brothers were gone within a minute of getting off the trains. The way she has saved herself was later in life, she found the doctor who was working with Mengele and met him, went home and took 4 months to write a letter of forgiveness and sent it back to him, and was totally ostracized by other camp members for almost being a traitor. But she said it set her free, and it gave her a power over him that no one else could have. So how do you set yourself free from such an atrocity?
You have to have instinct for survival. It's a lot of luck in. First of all, if somebody was in Auschwitz, extermination camp, you had very little choices what you can do for yourself. It was really mostly luck. In my case, you have to make decisions for yourself every moment, because nobody else will do it for you. And sometimes you felt maybe it's just better to give up. It was just too much pressure on you. But I never give up, and so I am here.
Mr. Shatz, have you been back to your hometown or to any of those horrible places that you were in?
No, but interestingly, not because of the Nazis, because after the war, I went back home, and so I lived there in my hometown. But we escaped against the communists. I'm an escape artist. So first the Nazis, and after the communists, and with my wife. And I would have gone back for a visit, but my wife didn't want to, because her parents went through a lot when we escaped the communists. So, but my hometown didn't have much to do with the Nazis. It was mostly because of the communists. We didn't go back. Actually, not to my home, to Prague. We lived in Prague, but yes.
This is not a question, a statement. I have long regarded you as our treasure.
Thank you so much. I feel that I have to say that I feel at home very much in America and also in Williamsburg. And I always say, to appreciate everything what America is, you have to first be from somewhere else. Because before we came to United States, we lived all over Europe. And we could have stayed there. I was a journalist and could have made a living. But I always wanted to come to America because everything, but it's still what Reagan said, it's a shining light on the hill.
Thank you for having us today. At times, there's been criticism that the Allies did not do enough. Do you have any feelings about that in terms of the camps and those that were in captivity, that the Allies let them down?
President Roosevelt said, we have to win the war. And it would have diverted, like to bomb Auschwitz, or the line going to Auschwitz, would have diverted, at least it is what I felt, too much of the military effort to finish the war. So it was the official explanation. And of course, there were people who just didn't want to get involved too much with the Jews. They didn't let in when it was a ship, but you maybe heard about it. It docked in Norfolk, and somebody knows about this story that, yeah, so somebody knows about it. And they were shipped back to Nazi Germany. It was a tourist ship, but they managed to get out of it, and they were sent back again. So it is a dark spot on American history, but all other countries have the same problem. So I am not especially singling out United States that it did the wrong thing. All over the world at that time it happened. Yeah.
Somewhat difficult question,
What?
Frank.
What is it?
Do you think that period, 1939, was unique? Is there any vision you could have that this degree of evil and terrible behavior can happen again in our modern times?
If it can happen again.
Yeah.
Now, you know,
Do you think it was unique for that period?
I don't believe that it can happen in the United States, because the long tradition of democracy, you know, in Germany they say because of the Prussian tradition to follow orders. It was the basic thing that the Nazis could amass so much power in such a short time. In the United States, it is a democratic tradition. So, but that Holocaust can happen. You know what happened in Africa all over, what happened in Cambodia. So they will never again. But it happened. The human nature is not perfect. And it has to be institution, but safeguard. It is why we here in this country have to be also very careful to assert ourselves as citizens. It is a long tradition, and if we give in, it can happen. You know, it was Pastor Niemhoff, the German Lutheran pastor, who said he spent years in the concentration camp. And after the war, he said, when I came for the trade unionist, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. When I came for the socialists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't. When I came for the Jews, I didn't speak up. When they came for me, there was nobody left who will speak up for me. So it is the lesson of history. You have to vote, and you vote your conscience. You have to have a free press. What I try to do to speak my mind and safeguard democracy. It is the lesson of history.
Mr. Shatz, you said you did not want to speak about the Holocaust. So those people who were the deniers started coming out of the woodwork. My statement is not, I didn't know the question, but it's a statement which follows what you have just mentioned. You said that your generation and the ones that followed, perhaps we're all, wouldn't be gone soon, and you were wondering if there would be any witnesses. So just to assure you, look around you, the young people who are here to bear witness to what you're saying. They are going to be our witnesses for the future, and their children's children, I hope, will be the witnesses to the future, so this will never, ever happen again. Thank you.
She said how you said that there may
soon there will not be Holocaust survivors left, but we're all here listening to you, and we'll always continue remembering it and talking about it.
Thank you so much. It made it worth to be here.
My kids are wondering if you met your wife in a concentration camp, or did you meet her after you came to the United States?
Where did you meet your wife?
In Prague. It was interesting. On a streetcar named Desire. It was an international sport event in Prague. And it was already under the communists, because the communists took over democratic Czechoslovakia in 1948. And it is when, and the communists gave an order that the Prague citizens should be very polite to anybody from outside, because they opened the border. And so we were both returning from this sport event, and it was streetcar 14 in Prague. And she was very pretty, and she was sitting next to me, and I was wondering, how could I, very prim, she didn't look anywhere, how can I approach her without being torn down? So, and I am originally from Slovakia, Czech and Slovak, and the languages are very similar, but is different. So I was talking in Slovak, and also with a Hungarian accent. So I looked to her like I am a foreigner. And I said, I looked for an address, and it was the address where I lived. And if she can explain it to me how to get there. And she tried to explain it. I played stupid. And I asked her to escort me. And it is what started. And I have to say, my wife is not Jewish. And when I met her, it was shortly after the war, so I wanted to make sure that I won't marry an anti-Semite. So I tried out all kinds of little tricks. If she has some anti-Semitic feeling, she didn't have, and we got married, and we are married 70 years. I am so sorry my wife isn't here, because she is not feeling well, and I just told her I will just talk to a few students at the, at the college, and now I don't know how can I explain it to her what happened. So I will have to have some false witnesses.
Tell her we love her. Tell her we appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much. It will make her happy.
You have mentioned that, can you hear me? Sorry. You had mentioned that you knew what was awaiting you if you took a certain choice. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the communication network that you had and how you knew what was awaiting you in certain areas, how that information got back to you, and how you communicated as you tried to help others and hide yourself.
How did the communication work?
During the,
yeah.
You know, it's also a story for a novel, because it's hard to believe that it really happened. In Budapest was a very famous restaurant, Gundel. It is now was bought by Americans. And during the war, it was the best place in Budapest to dine. It was a very privileged thing. All the Nazi high officers, Gestapo, have lunch, dinner there. And our group of Zionists who had false papers that we are working for the International Red Cross, and that we have, it was all fiction, immunity, diplomatic immunity. We have our lunch next table to the Nazis, and we were plotting against them next door, so next table. And it worked, because again, nobody could believe that we will have the nerve to go there where the Gestapo is having dinner. So it was how we communicated. There wasn't online, there wasn't even, you couldn't use the telephone, nothing. It was all very personal.
Thank you very much for coming today and sharing your story. I'm
Over there.
So you mentioned earlier that you had a lot of experience with the underground movement and help recognizing and helping out other Jews escape from the Nazis. So I guess my question is, what do you think are the most important things that we can do today to recognize and help out other people better?
What can we? Can you repeat the last few words that you said?
Of course, yeah. My question is, how do you think, or what are the most important things that we can do today to recognize and help out other people?
Okay. What can we do today to recognize and help out other people in need?
What to do?
Yeah.
Talk to your neighbors, write letters to the editor, vote not just in presidential election, but every election. Made your citizenship count, and America will be okay. I always say that we individually can be stupid, but there is a collective wisdom in this country, but puts us through all kinds of difficulties. In the end, if you let people vote freely, and you have a free press, and the judiciary what is independent, this country will survive.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shatz, for being with us today. I'm a senior at William & Mary. My name is Rachel Becker, but I was born Rachel Arkansas, and I actually just got back from Israel about a month ago. And I am a Jewish girl, but I've struggled with my faith my whole life. And I'm just curious about, if you would be so kind to answer, kind of how your relationship with your faith has been throughout your life, and then also the role of Israel following the Holocaust, and personally in your life as well. Thank you.
Again.
Wait, so the role of religion in your life, and what did you say about Israel?
The role of Israel following the Holocaust and in his life.
The role of Israel following the Holocaust and in your life.
No, religion in my life didn't. I am a moral person. I do everything what the Bible requires. At least I think I do. But I don't belong to any organized religion. And I feel that it's perfectly all right if people feel that they have this need in their life. It gives them comfort, and I have nothing against it. It's only I am not participating in it.
And can you talk a little bit about the role of Israel in your life?
Israel? Mm-hmm. It is Israel, like I said, I have not much to do with Jewish faith, but Israel is a safe haven. If wherever, whatever happens to Jews, they can always go there. It is true that it was born from a very difficult, that there are Arabs who claim part of the land. Of course, now many of the Arabs claim all the land, and they will expel all the Jews. But they lived there, Jews lived there for thousands of years, and it was the original state. And you know, there were hundreds of offers that Israel should start its life as a state somewhere in Uganda, in Africa, and it always was turned down because it is a historic place for the Jews. So again, I don't agree with everything what the Israeli government is doing. If I will be in charge, I will do it differently. But it is a question of survival. They offer to the Palestinians many times land, everything what they wanted, and they turned it down. For political reason, for personal reason. So Israel has a right to survive, and for the Jews everywhere, it's very important it should survive. I think so. He'll finish.
Okay, do you want to do one more question?
Yeah, okay.
We're just going to do one more question. Where is
Here is this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming and sharing your story. It was very moving for me because I have Jewish ancestors. And so my question is, you said that it was tempting at times to give up. And so what motivated you to not give up and to keep fighting for survival?
What motivated you to not give up?
Who knows? I was born, I suppose, by it is instinct what you have in. You don't know why, but you do the right thing. And I have to say, I never had nightmares. Many people who survived the Holocaust have nightmares. Because my conscience is clear. I never hurt anybody. If I couldn't help, I didn't hurt. So I did what my conscience told me to do, and I am here. I survived. Thank you very much for your presence. It was a great honor to me that you came, not just that you listened to my accent, but that you came here, and I suppose had a big problem with parking, and you are still here. You are great. You organize.